This unsolved murder is one of the most unusual Christmas mysteries that still leaves people questioning to this day. What really happened to JonBenet Ramsey? On the morning of December 25th, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, Patsy Ramsey came downstairs and found some pieces of paper lying on the stairs. When she began to read them, she actually discovered it was a ransom note telling her that her daughter, 6-year-old JonBenet, had been taken. Patsy raced to her room, which confirmed that she was missing from her bed. Immediately, they called the police and close friends to come and help them, meaning the scene wasn't properly secured at the time. But this was the first homicide the local police department had dealt with that year, which also raised questions on how it had been handled. The Ramsey family were a wealthy family and they lived in a big house, and JonBenet's room was located on the opposite side from her parents' room, meaning it would have been difficult to hear if anyone had entered the house. But nothing looked out of place, and people thought that if anyone had entered, they must have known the layout because the house was so big and so confusing. When investigators arrived and looked further at the note, they began questioning whether there was a kidnapper out there, or whether the family actually had something to do with the disappearance. This is because the note itself was very strange. Firstly, when they wanted to compare the handwriting of the parents with the ransom note, they found an initial draft of the note that was written inside the house on a pad that belonged to the family. And this wasn't a short ransom note, it was 3 pages long. The ransom note had requested $118,000 from the family, which seems like a very random number, but it was actually the amount that JonBenet's dad, John, had received as his work bonus for that year. Around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, after hearing nothing further from the kidnappers like they were told they would, John was told to search the house again. So he went straight to the basement, and when he searched, he noticed a broken window and a suitcase under the window, which was unusual, and it appeared to have been used as a step for someone to get out of the window. John admitted that he had broken the window a year earlier because he lost his key and used this to get in, and apparently the window had never been properly fixed. But on this particular morning, it was wide open. John then entered another room in the basement, and laying on the floor in front of him was the body of JonBenet. She had tape over her mouth, her hands were tied, and this adds a new layer of speculation because it contradicts everything that the note had said about her being kidnapped. An autopsy later revealed blunt force trauma, and she'd had a deep ligature around her neck and she'd been sexually assaulted. JonBenet had competed in many beauty pageants, and people judged this because they felt it attracts potential predators. But the main suspects were the parents. Instantly, the questions raised were around why wasn't the basement searched first? Because if the dad found her so easily, then why didn't they find her sooner? At one point, people even speculated that her 9-year-old brother Burke was involved in her murder. The theory around Burke suggested that he had killed her in a fit of rage over a late-night snack, as pineapple was found in her system. Burke later sued CBS after they suggested this theory in a show, but it shows how they were really focusing on the family being involved in some way. Burke was cleared as a suspect though in 2008. Sadly, this wasn't the only heartbreak the family had experienced, as JonBenet's half-sister Elizabeth had died in a car crash 5 years earlier. So the media wanted to run with this and state that the dad was an abuser and that he killed her. They even went as far as to say that Patsy had killed her in a fit of rage after she had wet the bed. Officers later compared the handwriting of the parents, and DNA from the scene didn't match the parents or her brother Burke. But officers couldn't drop the theory that the parents were involved in some way. But this wasn't the only crime committed in this area. In 1997, a girl who went to JonBenet's dance class was nearly assaulted after her mum caught an intruder who had broken in. This intruder was never caught, But again, the police were adamant that the Ramsey family were involved and still pursued this. This later resulted in a grand jury where it was concluded that there was insufficient evidence to move forward with any criminal case against the parents. And actually, all of these resources could have been used to focus on other potential leads. However, in the latest Netflix documentary, they explain how it came to light that the grand jury did actually indict them for child abuse, not murder, meaning they believed they were involved in some way or that they placed her in a situation where she was ultimately harmed. But they couldn't say beyond a reasonable doubt, so it couldn't be prosecuted. In the years since the murder, there have been many other potential suspects. Many of the parents from the beauty pageants had said that people often came to the shows who didn't actually have children there. And one photographer for JonBenet and other girls was called Randy Simons, and in his studio he had borderline inappropriate photos on the wall, which people believed to be strange. After the crime, he called some of the mothers, hysterically saying that he didn't kill JonBenet, but nobody ever said that he did. A year later, he was caught by police walking naked down the street, and again he started to tell them that he didn't kill her. Randy was later arrested for downloading child pornography on a restaurant's public Wi-Fi, but DNA again did not link him to the crime scene of JonBenet. Another suspect was John Eustace, who was charged with offences against children in North Carolina after breaking into a house. When they searched his home, they found a shrine to JonBenet, but he had a solid alibi for the night where he had clocked in at his work. But it does highlight how many people were attracted to this case, and many were capable of committing this awful crime. But one of the strangest suspects was in 2002, when someone began to email a person who had done a lot of work on the case. And he started saying that he had killed JonBenet and that it was an accident. Now by this point, many had wanted to confess to the case, so people were skeptical. But one thing that he told this person really stuck out to investigators. He had told them to ask John Ramsey what JonBenet's nickname was for her grandmother, and he gave the answer. But this answer wasn't out in the public domain. And he was actually correct. The dad had confirmed this name, which no one else would know. At the same time of this, Patsy's ovarian cancer had returned, and the mystery person was saying in the emails that he really wanted to speak to her before she died. She was prepared to talk to him, but he never called her when they arranged it, and she later died. These emails went on for years, and eventually they got to speak with him on the phone. He had said that he had a special relationship with JonBenet, and he spoke about what he apparently did to her that night. What he was saying did match the evidence retrieved from the crime scene. Eventually, they were able to track him down, and they discovered this mystery man to be John Mark Carr, who at the time was working in an elementary school in Thailand, and he had fled the US because of other child offences. But people were still skeptical of him and his story. He had said that he actually gotten into the house at 5 p.m, and the family were out at this time and didn't return till 10 p.m. So he had hid in the house all that time. But one of the weirdest factors is that one of the cleaners from the Ramseys' other properties in Michigan actually recognised him and stated that he had entered their garage and began asking questions. But again, there was no DNA match, and to this day, the killer of JonBenet has never been found. Now, the DNA was always problematic due to the contamination of the crime scene. Remember, lots of people were in and out, and they didn't even find the body until hours after. The police made lots of mistakes when dealing with the scene, and the police last week said that they have new evidence in the case and had conducted several new interviews based on tips received. John later remarried, and he is still focused on getting justice for JonBenet, and he recently featured in a recent Netflix documentary discussing the case from his perspective, which is so interesting to watch. But this still remains one of the most confusing, mysterious cases in history.